welcome to Elements of Ayurveda, Empowering Wisdom of Life. I'm your host, Colette, and in this podcast, I hope to empower you to take charge of your own health by sharing the holistic teachings of Ayurveda, the ancient healing tradition from India. We will also discuss topics like health and wellness, nutrition, yoga, fitness, meditation, breath work, and much more, as well as interviewing lots of inspiring people along the way. My humble wish is to help you to connect to your true nature, to Mother Nature, and to each other. If you like the content, be sure to subscribe to the show, and the new episodes will automatically download for you to enjoy. If you're new to Ayurveda, I recommend you listen to the first couple of episodes where I do an introduction to Ayurveda and the mind-body types. I've also set up a Facebook group for us to connect and to support each other, and I'd love for you to join me over at Elements of Ayurveda podcast group. And now, here's the show. Hello, and welcome to Elements of Ayurveda. I'm very happy to have John Immel of Joyful Belly back here today. Hi, John.
Hello, how are you?
I'm doing great, thanks, and so thankful to have you back and to share your wisdom on the show. Now, I spoke with John back in episode 41, and it was titled Ayurvedic Nutrition with Joyful Belly. So if you want to hear more about John and the Joyful Belly story, you can check that episode out. But today, we want to get right into it because we're going to talk about the challenges of eating an Ayurvedic diet and incorporating your partner or your family. It's a question I get asked a lot. And then we're going to talk about some seasonal foods that would be great to incorporate in your life right now. And we're going to do one for the Northern Hemisphere and one for the Southern Hemisphere because I want to make sure everybody gets served on this show. And as promised, we're going to give you a recipe. We're going to give you lots of details on these great seasonal fruits, and then we're going to give you a recipe to try, and then we're going to try them out and get into the Elements of Ayurveda podcast Facebook group and just share what we learned about these fruits and how they feel in our body. So lots to get into, John. First of all, the first question I want to ask you is the challenges of cooking for a family. How can a person who wants to eat Ayurvedically, who learned about their doshas and wants to follow this Ayurvedic cooking, and they come up with all these challenges. Let's start with the biggest challenge of all, is eating the main meal at lunchtime. What advice do you give to people that you come across in your school and in your business about how to incorporate this, how to make that shift to eating the main meal at lunchtime?
Yeah, people have various challenges with making lunch the main meal of the day with their professional life. The day tends to be busy for folks, yes. and so that's really the main challenge with having lunch as the main meal. So how do we get around the challenge of a busy day is almost the best way to answer the question, how to have the main meal at lunch, right?
Right.
And so typically what I will counsel clients who have a busy day and they're under time pressure is to cook all of their meals in the morning before they leave for work. So this means they're cooking breakfast and making their lunch at the same time in the morning as part of their routine.
Okay.
And this keeps them and lunch and dinner. They can it can be the same food for lunch and dinner. They just make enough for lunch and dinner. That way, by the time 7 a.m. The clock strikes 7 a.m., they have all their food prepared for the day.
Okay.
That's one major strategy for that. Because otherwise what I notice happens with clients is that they'll grab something quick for breakfast. They will not have time to even really eat for lunch, so they'll just have a granola bar or two.
Sure.
Then they will be ravenous around 3 p.m. and have an energy slump. And then when they get home, they're too tired to cook for dinner.
Right.
And so this just becomes a downward eating spiral. What you really want to do is get those meals prepared in the morning. And we have lots of great, there's just lots of great tips for how to make a easy make it easy to prepare meals so that you're not, it's not a 2-hour meal preparation in the morning, but something that's very quick and the food's cooking while you're taking a shower, something like that. So getting those meals prepared is the first of all number one, and then the second, of course, is carving out enough time for lunch. You need to eat the meal and rest after eating. Exactly. That comes down to really convincing the client that it's going to increase their productivity. Yes. That a 45-minute break makes the rest of their day way more productive. If you can double your productivity for each hour after lunch, you're getting back more than the time that you're taking out of your busy day.
Great. It is so key to rest and digest and to get away from the computer, to get away from any sensory overload and try have that meal in a quiet time. And it's right. It's really helping the client understand that this is so important, not only for you to be in a calm environment while eating, but what environment you're in will affect how you digest that food. And if you're in a calm environment, it will digest well. You'll have no bloating. You'll have none of that excessive gas or other digestive problems. And like you said, you'll be more productive in the afternoon because you allowed your body to rest and digest. So key.
Yeah.
And I love your idea about meal prepping in the morning. I think it's so important to be prepared and to almost plan your meals on a Sunday evening for the week ahead. I think that's a good tip too. Now, if someone says, look, John, that's great. I'd love to have the time to meal prep in the morning. How about doing it the night before?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, then people start raising up questions of leftovers, things like that. Yeah. But really, in the end, like, okay, not having fresh food is important, but having food is more important than not having food.
Right, exactly.
So if you have to do it the night before, then do it the night before. Crock pots. I mean, there's a lot of tricks to the trade here, and so I don't want someone to just think that they can't do it because they have a preconceived idea of how long it takes to cook or their individual cooking skills and things like that. Don't let those things be hang-ups.
Yes, and that's what I wanted to get to. Absolutely, that in consultations, it will be tailored to your lifestyle. Like when I talk to a client, I'll be like, okay, what's your morning routine? What's your day like? And it will be fitted in. It's like, okay, you don't have time at this time, so let's look at another alternative. It's not, in Ayurveda, it's very flexible and it's all about fitting into your lifestyle and not creating extra stress. So like John said, don't say, oh, no time in the morning, can't do that. I'm just going to not do that at all. No, there's ways and means around it. And it is so important for your health. To have this food prepped and to be eating fresh food that's easy digestible. Sometimes, John, I suggest to clients, particularly if they have families and they're very busy, is to cook food in batches. So maybe cook a batch of rice, a batch of quinoa, a batch of roasted vegetables on a Sunday when they have time, say, for their week ahead. And I know, in Ayurveda, as you alluded to, it's said that, food leftovers can have a tamasic quality, can have a heavy quality, a sluggishness quality. However, we have to be realistic also, right? That cooking food in batches for 2 days, maybe. What do you think of that?
Well, I've done research on this specifically. Great. And it turns out that, okay, so you really want to think about 3 categories here. You want to think about your starches, your meats, and your veggies. So your veggies are the nutrient quality can go down pretty quickly, but also there's a lot of veggies that are just quick and easy to cook. Right. You take some frozen veggies from the freezer. Oftentimes those have more nutrients than the fresh produce because they're frozen at the farm, locking in those nutrients. And you just throw them in a pot and boil them, and 10 minutes later they're ready. So with with a lot of the veggies, sometimes it's just super easy and quick to throw them in a pot and have them fresh. So let's talk about meats and starches. Meats, it turns out, can improve with age, and you see cultures all over the world that age their meats. In fact, almost every culture ages meats to some degree. And after you cook a meat, it actually becomes more digestible as a leftover than when you first cook it. Now, this is exactly the opposite of a starch. Rice, when you cook rice, starches have these carbohydrates are really sugar chains. They're chains of sugar, and they have a tendency to like, they like each other. There's an affinity there. And so they just combine and form these longer and longer strains the more they sit as leftovers. Okay. So if a person has digestive problems, realize that 24-hour-old rice has more complex carbs in it, and then 48-hour-old rice has even more complex carbs in it. And it's called these resistant starches that will increase gas and bloating depending upon the client's digestive strength. And so meats, improved, starches get harder to digest, vegetables degrade. Those are that's the way you want to think about it with leftovers.
That's great. Yeah. Excellent points. They're really good. Thank you for that. And I agree. The veggies are so quick, and they can be so quick to just, like you said, boil or stir fry or whatever, that you can do that so fast. But keeping in mind that you don't want to keep the starches sitting so long. That fantastic. Great points. And with the veggies, just a little side note on the frozen. So like you said, the frozen veggies are picked at their peak of ripeness, and then they're flash frozen, so they have all those nutrients. And what does Ayurveda say about frozen food? Seeing as you're the nutrition expert here.
Well, freezing something is processing it, right?
Yes, yeah.
And so we have to remember that any time we're processing a food, we're changing it. And that doesn't mean for the worse. It can mean for the worse, though. Freezing tends not to degrade nutrients as much as cooking. In fact, cooking quickly degrades the nutrient quality of a food the more it's cooked, and that's why you see all these kind of raw food movements with, fresh, and you hear people say prana-filled, very fresh kind of food. And so freezing is a processing, but I don't think it causes as much of a problem, And again, you have to remember the fresh produce at the grocery store, depending upon where you get your groceries, that may be traveling 1,000 miles, sitting in a truck, and that's causing changes too.
Exactly.
So we can't just assume fresh produce is better than frozen.
Exactly. Good. And a good point to bring up about raw food, and while we mention it, I just want to say to people, yes, it is prana rich, but if you don't have a strong digestive system, you can't access that prana because the body has a hard time breaking it down. Do you agree with that statement? What do you think about that?
Absolutely. We're always putting digestion before nutrition. If you can't digest something, you can't get the nutrients out of it. So
it's best. That's why Ayurveda recommends cooking things so that they're partially broken down and your body can digest and assimilate them easily into the body. Great. Yeah. Well, thank you for that. Okay, I have lots more questions. So we're saying to the family who's trying to cook Ayurvedic for their family members is to cook, be prepared, either cook in the morning or if you have to the night before, again, not creating huge stress, just working around your schedule. And what if your partner or your child doesn't want to eat healthily? Do you have any suggestions for that?
Yes. That's that's a problem that lots of people run into. And the first thing, start this journey of with your family by validating your family, right? We want to start off with this compassion. Most people take the standpoint that this is like a fight, right? That they're gonna just try to fight their way into their hubby having a new diet that's better for them, right? Yeah. And I think that's counterproductive on multiple levels. And the biggest reason is that it's even counterproductive for a person's own health. Yeah. We need the people in our community to guide us also. And so you want to give them a voice. They, what I see with a lot of clients is they get over fixated on the rules of Ayurveda, and that can undermine their health too. And exactly. And so validate your family. They want to eat something enjoyable. They're having certain cravings. They're calling for certain things. Maybe they're in their body. Maybe they're operating off of instincts, and calling attention to those instincts can actually be healthy for you. So that's the first thing is that not to push the people around you too much, but actually instead learn from them. Really think about what the people in your family are craving and contemplate why they're craving it, and see if there isn't some hidden health wisdom behind that too, so that you can really find a meeting of the minds there. Great. I think that's the best emotional starting point for everyone instead of this, it's going to be a health war mentality.
Right, my way or the highway kind of thing. Yes.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay, but then of course the reality is that sometimes change is necessary. So we're not going to just go along with what everyone else thinks. Is that we have a voice too. We are the voice of our wisdom is your wisdom. The client's wisdom is really important too. And to this point, I would say that conversion happens through personal experience, right? Mm-hmm. So people always like to say disease is contagious, right? You see the people wearing the face masks in cities when there's an outbreak of avian flu, because they all know disease is contagious. But health is also contagious. So we have to remember that when your family has an experience of greater vitality, greater energy, that is going to be motivating for them. Nobody likes to sit around and feel tired, ill, any of these things. And so just always remember that back in your mind, that people crave energy, vitality, freshness. And so you're always going to find a welcome ear if you're actually offering that, and not through coercive argument, but through cooking something that's delightful to them, that also makes them feel good. That's going to be your greatest tool. I did that for my parents. My dad's a New York cop. He had wanted nothing to do with Ayurveda in the beginning, but I cooked for him for 1 month.
Lovely.
And he loved the food. He didn't even know he was on a diet, but he lost 20 pounds. Wow. He felt 20 years younger. And ever since then, he tells all his friends about Ayurveda. So that's a conversion story right
Fantastic.
there. And that's really the way you want to approach this.
Fantastic. I love it. And it was great that you were able to cook for him. And like you said, he didn't even know he was on a specific eating plan. And felt the benefits. That's huge. Like you said, for a person to have a real life experience, feel the benefits in their own body, because we could wax lyrical about the benefits of this diet, but until somebody feels it in their own body and in their mind and feels the benefits, that's where you really win this argument.
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
That's great.
Yep.
And so if you have somebody in your family who, okay, let's say, for example, the Ayurvedic spices, like we have coriander and cumin and fennel, and you have children who are like, yuck, don't want any of that. Sometimes I suggest to my clients, well, you cook up, the food, the starch, the protein, the veggies, and then in a little pan at the side, cook off these spices for yourself in a little bit of ghee and just add them into your food at the end. Do you have any other tips for that? You have children. We were just talking about them before the recording. Yeah. So how do you handle that in your own family?
Yes. Okay. So Ayurveda first thing we want to remember is that Ayurveda offers a lot of flexibility.
Yes.
We're really not locked into a specific spice or using spices at all. Mm-hmm. There's a real art here, and Ayurveda is a sort of marriage of delight and health, and that's the point we want to be thinking about, is how do I delight my children, and be thinking that. We should be thinking that it's not like there's just one food that your child should eat, but there's just really such a great range that it's actually not hard to find foods that are really compatible with everyone. There's lots of tridoshic foods, in other words. Yes. It's not like it's the exception that a food is good for everyone. It's almost like it's the norm that a food is good for everyone. And so when we're thinking about cooking for multiple people with multiple different body types, what we always want to remember is that there's usually only about 6 or 7 foods that a person has to avoid. And so if there's 4 people in your family and there's 6 or 7 foods for each person, maybe for one person they have to avoid alcohol. So you're not going to put alcohol in the food, right? Mm-hmm. Like a coq au vin or something that, right? Yes. We're not going to cook something like that. Or if a person in your family has a strong kapha imbalance, you may not serve something that has wheat and cheese, next to something fried, right? Right. And so we're thinking about like, what are the big main things that each person should avoid, and how do and there's just, once you sort of subtract those really problematic foods, you realize that there's just a world of flexibility within that.
Yes.
And then, as you said, Colette, there's the garnishes are key, right? You can. One person who's vata and deficient can always add a little extra olive oil onto their rice, to make it richer.
Yes.
The kapha person can always put that strong cayenne pepper that's going to really invigorate them and get their heart pumping and help them digest that food. Whereas the pitta person, they're not going to reach for the cayenne pepper. The pitta person probably won't use any spices at all, or use a very mild spice like coriander, or a pitta pacifying spice like cardamom. And so the garnishes are your hidden secret for cooking for multiple individuals.
Yes. Yeah, I think that's such great advice. And I really want to repeat what you mentioned, is that flexibility. I think there's so much truth in that. If we get very rigid about things, and if it has to be, very black and white, that is not Ayurveda at all. It's about having flexibility. It's about enjoying life. Enjoying food is one of the greatest pleasures in life. And it's about enjoying your mealtime and not creating this scenario in your family where there's stress around mealtime, because that in itself can lead to digestive problems. So making it a fun experience, having your children be curious about the different types of food, have them sample different things maybe, but being flexible about it. I'm a big believer in the 80-20 rule, like 80% we're in a good routine, we have a healthy diet, and 20% you go out and you enjoy your pizza, or you have your wine, and you have fun with it. It's about being flexible, and then the next day you get back on your good routine and your healthy eating. What's your philosophy there, John?
Absolutely. Ayurveda is the art of living well no matter what your circumstances. And one of my favorite things is to always remind people that Ayurveda doesn't translate to the art of health. It translates to the art of life.
Yes.
It actually is not about health. It's about living. And and so part of living is good health, though. An important piece of living is good health, but it's not the most important. The most important is having a wonderful life. And so, if no matter what situation I'm in, I can do Ayurveda. If, I was visiting my sister and her kids, and, they wanted to go to McDonald's, right? And what am I going to be the stick in the mud here and keep everyone from enjoying their McDonald's meal because of my Ayurvedic diet? Or am I going to sit there and not eat anything at all and make everyone uncomfortable? Absolutely not. Right. So I can find a way to eat Ayurvedically in McDonald's. Now, it's not going to be that pristine sattvic, kind of thing. But what I'm gonna focus on, again, in a situation like that, is what I'm really not going to do. What am I not going to do? I'm not going to order the huge Big Mac with a huge cup of Coca-Cola and then get the I don't know what you even call it, the big ice cream with all the fudge and stuff on it, whatever. Yes. I might get the fish and majig or something, and not eat the bun even, or whatever. I'm going to find a way to make it work as best as I can for that situation, recognizing and really putting faith in my body and believing in my body that my body will accommodate it.
Exactly.
And I can just relax.
Exactly. Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree with you. I think, John, they are fantastic tips. I think that's going to help a lot of people out there. So thank you for those. And now I'd like to get talking about our seasonal fruits. And we chose today apple for the Northern Hemisphere and grapefruit for the Southern Hemisphere. So I'd like to start with apples, and tell us all about this wonderful fruit. As we know, nature gives us what we need in season to keep us in balance. So tell us about why apples are here now in the Northern Hemisphere.
Okay, great. Well, I'm going to start our discussion on apple with experientially, because I think that's so important. As I said, and when working with my father and with my clients, and really my kids, anyone, is that it's an experience that really causes the change, or provides the insight. And so, what is the experience of eating a stewed apple? And then let's connect that to why it's great for the season. Great. Well, first of all, when you're just thinking about a stewed apple, you feel a sense of comfort. I mean, it's evocative of that. It's warm, it's soft, it's easy. it almost seems to melt in your mouth and slides very easy down the tongue. It's a bit sour, a bit sweet, and so that's our basic experience here, and that's going to really give us those hints into why it's so helpful for the fall. So what are some of the things that are going on in the fall? Well, the first is in the fall we have the residual effects of summer that in September particularly comes after August. We've been baked all summer, dried out. We're kind of like cracked mud by the end of on the desert floor by the end of August. And I notice every year I have a tendency to get rashes. Maybe it's poison ivy from the garden. I can blame it on that, or maybe it's just a little irritation there. But I notice slight skin irritations cropping up early September every year with my Pitta Vata constitution, and so apples really come to the rescue at that point. That bit of sourness and that bit of sweetness is your cue that apples are going to be reducing Pitta dosha, that residual Pitta dosha at the end of the summer, that residual heat.
Yes.
And so sour taste, it's a cholagogue, and getting a little medical here, but it is important. It's a cholagogue, means that it forces your gallbladder to release bile, and that bile in the gallbladder is hot, and it releases into the small intestine. So it kind of gets it from internally in your body, sort of in your bloodstream, in your liver. It gets that heat out, and it puts it in the intestine. And the intestines are not really in your bloodstream anymore, right? So it kind of gets that heat out of the blood. That's a way to think about it. We can get a little bit more into that some other time, but basically it's going to pull this hot bile out and extract it from the blood, and that's going to cool down the blood, that bit of sourness in the apple. And sour also has malic acid in it, which is a liver tonic, and that cools down Pitta too, but that's getting very specific there. The sweetness, same thing. Sweetness in general pacifies that heat of Pitta. Yeah. So great to clear away residual Pitta in the late summer. Then there is a number of great reasons why we should eat apple in the fall. Should I continue on that?
Oh, please. This is great. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Great. So now I mentioned the cracked mud metaphor, right? Yes. That the heat has really cracked out the mud. And then as we move into the fall, the temperature starts to drop. What does your body want to do? Your body wants to take the fats that you're eating and the fats in your bloodstream and use them to build up a layer of fat in the skin, and that's going to insulate and protect you against winter. So when that cold happens, your body's basically going to extract fats from your blood. That's what you want to remember. That's the effect of cold. What does this do to your blood? It really thins it out and dries it out, actually. It makes you start peeing more because your blood's actually thinner. Okay. And so you start losing fluids, and you start to feel more dry, and so there's that cracked mud metaphor again. But now it's not because of the heat that's cracking the mud; it's the coolness that's cracking the mud. Right. And your skin will start to dry out as the temperature gets cooler and cooler. Well, this dryness has multiple effects on the body. First of all, it causes constipation, gas, and bloating. Common thing in the fall is. And it causes insomnia, too. Common thing, as soon as fall starts, is people have trouble sleeping, pooping, and they get gassed.
Right. And then maybe a little bit of anxiety, too, a little bit of stress.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. The stress comes up right away because of the toxicity that comes from the gas, bloating, and constipation. Right. And and even the imbalance in electrolytes from the dryness also creates the anxiety. Yeah. So how does apple address this? Well, first of all, the sweetness is nourishing, and that's what you want to do for the fall is nourish. And in fact, the recipe we're going to share with apples is going to really boost that nourishing element. We'll talk about how we do that in just a bit. So the sweetness is nourishing. The sourness is a bit hydrating, right? So that it kind of sour, I don't want to say sour is hydrating because it doesn't increase fluids in the body, but what it does is it moves them around. And so it gets the fluids moving in your body, and that's actually helpful for digestion.
Right.
And then finally, or actually two more reasons, that apples are very easy to digest, so you don't get gas and bloating from them. Now, some people, if they have a high amount of fructose in their diet, they can get gas and bloating. So just be aware that this is not going to work for everybody. Some people will get more gas with apples, but the average individual is probably going to find apples easy to digest, and that's going to be helpful when fall digestion's a little bit, upset.
Now, can I ask you a question there?
Yeah,
is that, are you referring to cooked apples, or is this raw?
I'm referring to cooked apples, stewed apples.
Okay. I just want to make sure.
Yeah. Raw apples have that a little bit more astringency. They're a little harder to digest. They're actually an appetite suppressant.
Yeah.
But the raw apples are better for clearing pitta. So we're going to be thinking about, do we want to cook or not? Are we, we're always making those little processing decisions as we're preparing our Ayurvedic foods.
Right.
So finally, last thing, apples, because of their sourness, that's going to soften stools, and the fiber content of apples is going to bulken up stools. That's going to really help with that fall constipation.
Right, because that pectin.
All of those, yeah. That's the main. That covers the main reasons why apples. We sort of have an uncanny natural craving for a few crispy apples in early December and early September, and a few soft, stewed, warm, wonderful apples in late September.
Yes, exactly. And nature's providing them to us to get that excess heat out of the body. And also, like you said, they're nurturing, and they have that, they have a high water content as well. But in general, as we say in Ayurveda, there's no one size fits all. That's why we recommend private consultations to really understand your body type. But in general, it's best to stew them at this time of year. Right?
Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah. We're moving into that time where it's better to stew.
Yeah.
And it really depends on local climate, temperature, etc.
Exactly. So a raw apple for a pitta person, a high pitta constitution, may be easy to digest. However, if you have a vata or kapha constitution, it can be harder to digest that raw apple, and best to cook it, definitely. So can you tell us about the recipe that we're going to suggest that people try out?
Yes, applesauce with ginger and ghee.
Nice.
Would be a great, and really or stewed apple. I mean, we're stewed apples also with ginger and ghee. This is what that ginger that we add to it, and the ghee. One, very delicious, great, satisfying, wonderful recipe. Anyone, even if a person is very sick, they can just derive a lot of benefits from that. So it's just so helpful for a wide range of people. And then the ginger is a great digestive. The ghee is going to add that extra richness, because you remember your body's taking those fats and putting them in the skin. You want to assist that process. That's going to give you the stamina that you need to fight colds in October and November and December. Is having those fats, getting that insulating layer in the skin is going to just make your body sail through fall without getting sick. Excellent.
And is this ground ginger, dried ginger, or fresh ginger?
Well, that's up to you. The dried ginger, you can easily just pop that on if you have some in the cabinet. If you have the fresh ginger available, then I would choose the fresh over the dried, just because I think it has a more vibrant flavor as a cook. Yeah, I would choose the fresh, but really, I'll leave that up to the client.
Yeah, and I know I talked about this in another episode on spices, but the dry ginger is a little bit more heating, right? If for a person who has a high pitta constitution, so just be aware of that. Particularly if you're a high pitta, maybe going towards the fresh ginger, definitely better for you. And yes, the fresh is always better. Right? Fresh is always better to you. So that sounds yummy. And then we're going to attach that recipe from the Joyful Belly side in the show notes. And we're going to encourage you to make that in this month. And like I said, go into the Elements of Ayurveda podcast group and share your results. And I want you to start thinking about the effect of on your body and your mind while you're eating this, and then afterwards, how does it make you feel? Do you notice any differences in your body? I think I want you to start making that connection with your food and seeing the effects of on your doshas, and just having awareness around it. I think that makes it very exciting too. This food is going to become your cells and your tissues, so we really want to be aware of what we're putting into our body. So yum, that sounds fantastic. And let's move now. Is that all? That's loads of information. Anything else you want to add about apples before we move on to grapefruit?
No, I think that's enough to digest for now.
Exactly. And so now let's go towards grapefruit, which are in season in the southern hemisphere. Grapefruit is something that I have to say I don't eat too often because I have a high pitta constitution. So I'm very interested in hearing about grapefruit. Okay,
great. Well, let's start with the experience of a grapefruit then, just like we did with the apple. And then we'll get into why it's so helpful in that when the cold winter is ending and spring is beginning, which is what's happening in the southern hemisphere. So grapefruit, what distinguishes grapefruit from other citrus fruits is its bitterness, right? We don't really get that with lemons, limes, or oranges. Oranges are very sweet. Lemons and limes are more pure sour. And with the grapefruit, we have this curious bitterness that enters into it. And it's not just a bitter, but it's a bit of a hot bitter. There's something a bit slightly sharp and pungent about a grapefruit. And that is really why we're gravitating towards that. Really, any of the citrus fruits are okay for spring, but grapefruit emerges as the real home run hitter for the spring. So the sourness of grapefruit, it's gonna immediately you're gonna feel your eyes and mouth puckering. You're gonna notice that the grapefruit has a lot of that white fibrous material around it that's even more bitter. And you may even notice if you get a bit of the skin or try a bit of the skin, that it is extremely sharp, extremely pungent. In fact, that grapefruit skin is one of the best digestives I know of, is that little bit of grapefruit zest. Actually, if you zest a grapefruit, you're talking about an extremely powerful digestive.
Oh, so you're talking about the zest, the outside, the color part, rather than the white pith?
No, the white pith is the bitter part.
Okay.
That zest is a very pungent digestive. It's used in Chinese medicine as really the top number one digestive. And really, it's such a great metaphor with digestive fire, because if you take grapefruit skin and you fold it backwards, you'll see like the oils from the grapefruit will burst out of the skin. And if you actually held a lighter to that or a match to that, you'd see that they would explode a little bit. These little mini explosions. It's fascinating to watch.
Talk about Rajasic.
Yeah, there's a lot of fire in these grapefruits. Yeah, exactly.
Wow, I never heard of that. How cool.
Yeah, it's very cool. So grapefruit is going to be pungent, bitter, sour, and a little sweet. All of these invigorating, stimulating, get your juices moving flavors. And so grapefruits are going to feel cleansing. You're going to feel light after eating them. I'm going to just share some quotes from students in our school around grapefruit, right? Here. One student says, I feel a boost of energy soon after eating them and was very hungry within an hour. Another student, grapefruit was very hydrating and fresh with lots of prana. I loved it, and it reminded me about the fresh living quality of aliveness that I wanted to eat to regenerate my fatigued physical self.
Wow, cool.
Isn't that, the grapefruit brought clarity to my mind. It quenched my thirst and was full of addictive happiness. It gave me a summertime feeling in the winter and put a spring in my step.
I love it. That's great. And that's exactly what I want this audience of listeners to start experiencing that from their food and just have that curiosity. Thank you for sharing those.
Yeah. Yeah, well, those are those are testimony to the fresh, invigorating qualities of grapefruit. And what do we need more after the long, stagnant winter than that stimulation, that freshness, that invigorating movement?
Yeah.
So, with that, we can connect right to some of the spring benefits. What does sour taste do? We talked about sour taste with the apple being hydrating and moving fluids. What is one of the ways that sourness moves fluids? It does it by dilating blood vessels. So when we eat something sour, it causes vasodilation, and that is what starts your blood moving. Now, what does winter do? Winter is a vasoconstrictor. It constricts the blood vessels because your body wants to slow the flow of blood, particularly to the skin, to prevent heat loss. Grapefruit opens that up, which is what you want in the spring, right? And the spring comes, it's starting to get warmer. You want to convince your body to start moving blood, and that's what's going to start purging toxins from your body. It's going to start warming you up. One student even said, when I ate grapefruit, it restored a rosy pink glow to my skin.
Wow.
And, isn't that wonderful? Because who wants to have that lifeless, dull winter skin, So great. Sour moves bile as well, which you want to start purging. Bile is hot, as I mentioned earlier, but it's also oily. And in the fall, you want to add fat. In the spring, you want to take those fats out of your body. So same principle now is going to work in the spring, where you're taking these sharper sours to really purge oily, thick bile, fatty bile out of your body. That's going to encourage the movement of fats back out of your skin and help you transition towards a lighter weight and feeling less overheated by the time summer comes. So grapefruit's going to assist with that whole process of cleansing, purging fats, and that those fats have tons of toxins in them. You're just going to get rid of all of that with grapefruit. Bitter taste, it's going to do the same thing as sour. It's going to purge those fats out of your liver bile system, really extracting it from the blood.
Great, that's fantastic. Yeah, I remember growing up, and they giving you diets, and there was always grapefruit for breakfast, which I always had a hard time with. but it was that old-fashioned diets. Do you remember them way back when in the 80s? And it would be like grapefruit for breakfast, and I would be like, one eye closed, eat it because it was so bitter. So I'd love to hear your recipe for grapefruit. Or unless do you have other information you want to share before that?
Well, of course, we could, talking about these foods is sort of, I don't know, I have a love affair of talking about,
it's great.
Ingredients. So, I would love to share more quotes from our students.
Please.
And, more experience of, okay, well, great. So let's talk about a few, I want to talk about a few contraindications of grapefruit because grapefruit, it can be a little intense. Here's what some folks had to say. Vata individuals. One student said that I felt a draining or pulling of liquids from my kidneys, causing exhaustion. Wow. So this sourness and astringency in Chinese medicine, it's called astringing the kidneys. So for a person who's very Vata, they're not going to want too much grapefruit. As you said, Colette, you were sitting there eating those grapefruits with one eye closed.
I know, that's sour. Yes, because it's very drying. Yeah.
It can be very drying. Yeah. So for a Vata person in the winter, even if as spring comes, they're not going to, maybe they'll stick with oranges instead of grapefruits. With oranges are just a little more neutral and a little bit less intense.
Great.
Here's another person. I have such a love affair with grapefruit, yet sometimes I break out in a rash when I have too much. Well, grapefruits are heating. They aggravate pitta.
Yeah.
And here's the thing, folks. If you break out in a rash from eating something, don't eat it again.
You've had too much. You've crossed the line.
You've crossed the line. Exactly. Yeah. So another person said I had a tingling or burning sensation from it, and it's just really I'm pointing out these contraindications. One, to caution those individuals who can't handle that, but also to testify to the power of grapefruit.
Yes, yeah.
That if you're the type of person that needs that stimulating effect, then grapefruit is where it's at.
Right, exactly. They're that powerful, and that powerful a substance in your body that it can have this huge imbalance effect too if it's not right for you. Wow, that's fantastic, and it's great to hear those insights from the students and really being aware. I love that, and that's, like I said, what I want for the listeners here is to really have that awareness of how is this affecting my body, and eating it and really being conscious of what it's doing to your body and your mind when you're eating it. Love it.
Yeah, the pharmacological effects of food are something that you can experience. We don't have to just look it up in a lab or in a library.
Right.
But there's a way, and we teach this, in our programs, but, there's a way to experience and discover the medicinal effects of food. How did the original herbalists do it? 300 years ago or 500 years ago or 1,000 years ago, they only had their five senses to go on. And you really learn incredible amounts of medicine from personal experience.
Exactly. That's the best way. Just like we talked earlier about experiencing it in your own body instead of just reading about it or listening to it. Try it. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And so do you recommend with like something like grapefruit, eating it alone?
Well, I see every recipe I make as an herb formula. So I'm looking at the grapefruit, and if it matches exactly what my, gunas, doshas, tastes, etc., all those, if I analyze it and I think, okay, this is exactly for me, it works for me, then I will eat it alone. Okay. But I'm a pitta person.
Yep.
I mentioned already that in early September, I can get those skin irritations and stuff. So I'm going to be a little cautious with grapefruit. I'm going to tone it down a little bit. Maybe I'll put, maybe I'll sprinkle a little sugar on top of it to increase the sweetness of it. Maybe I will work a little harder to get rid of all that bitter, the bitter or pungent pith that's sort of around the surrounding the grapefruit, and just have the flesh, which I actually do. Sometimes I like to pull those nice juicy little cysts out of the grapefruit. Even pulling off the skin around each wedge, it's just so much more enjoyable eating grapefruit, I think, without the skin around those wedges.
Interesting.
And so, I'm always doctoring every single bit of food, not through this complex, difficult 3-hour sort of thing. It's just, not through a spreadsheet or a scientific analysis or anything like that. I just kind of reach over and, do a little fun things. And I'm like, and to me, that's just the joy of being in the kitchen, well, and I promised a specific recipe with grapefruit. And so one of the things you can do in the winter is you can boil the grapefruit or even broil it and put a little cinnamon on it.
Nice. I never thought of that. Wow.
Yeah, that's a fantastic way of doing grapefruit. You just get that sort of little roasted.
Nice.
If you broil it, you get a little bit of that roastedness in there. The cinnamon really warms it up and even intensifies it more. Sometimes you can sprinkle a little cloves on there or even a little honey in there when you're broiling it. Makes it just a really nice warm treat. And when you're having a grapefruit on a cold, crispy winter morning.
Yeah, that sounds amazing. Yeah, and using the heating spices of clove and cinnamon, and honey's heating too. Yum.
Yep, all that's going to be moving that blood, getting your blood pumping. It's like, what do you do in early, really late winter, very, very early spring, January, February, March, is you're going to take those hot baths, be eating grapefruit, and that's going to be extremely supportive.
Fantastic. That's great. So the recipe then for people to try is
broiling. The grapefruit.
Yeah,
put it in the oven,
yes.
Put it on broil, and sprinkle a little bit of cinnamon, cloves, and honey on top.
Fantastic. That sounds delicious. Great. And, it's interesting as we talk, we're eating obviously breakfast in the kapha time of day. So 6 to 10 a.m. is the kapha time of day. So it's actually, of course, it depends on your constitution, your imbalance, etc. But that's the perfect time of day to have this, right? To have this invigorating food this
Yep.
rejasic food is in that heavier time of day, that heavy
Yeah,
cough
get things
energy.
going in the morning. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Great. And another question that came to my mind as we're chatting is that I guess it also depends on where this fruit is grown as to the qualities of the fruit, right? If it's grown in a very hot environment, it may have different qualities to if it's grown in a cooler environment. What do you
Oh,
think?
yeah, there's a mind-boggling array of details in
Right.
every single thing we eat. I mean, it's a
Right.
living thing. And
Right.
it's been influenced by the environmental conditions, processing, shipping, all these kinds of things. And so, I find it a lot of fun to contemplate all of that. And at the same time, I try to also forget it sometimes too, because I just don't want to overwhelm myself.
I know, it can be too much.
With all the details,
Yeah, I think the easiest rule of thumb is wherever possible, eat local. Eat seasonal, obviously, and eat local, because then you know you're getting what you need in your area from nature, where possible. Eat local, I think, is always the best way to go. You know you're getting what you need for the climate you're in, because
and it's fresher.
Yeah, exactly.
It tastes better.
Yes, and a less of a carbon footprint, and support your local farmers market. I always get that in there.
Yeah.
John, this has been fantastic. Okay, so folks, we want you to try. We're starting off nice and easy. We're going to be doing these regular episodes with John, discussing these seasonal foods. And we said, let's start. I asked John to start gently today. Stewed apples and our broiled grapefruit. And I'm going to attach those recipes in the show notes. They're from the Joyful Belly site. And then that site is fantastic. It gives all the details and all the gunas, the taste, what the dosha effects, etc. within the recipe, so it's amazing. And let's share our experiences over on the Elements of Ayurveda podcast Facebook group. That's fantastic. John, any other words of wisdom before we finish up today? Before you say that, thank you so much. This has been amazing. I have learned a lot. I think it's going to really encourage people to listen to their bodies, to experience the food, to get excited. I know I'm ready to try out these recipes and really pay attention to how it feels in my body and my mind. But any last words that you want to share?
Yeah, I want to. I want to just remind everyone that to pay attention to how food feels right when you put it in your mouth, as you're chewing it. Even set a phone alarm 20 minutes after a meal.
Yes.
You can discover the medicine of food through your body awareness. And there may be, some terms that, if you knew the terms, you would be able to describe food more accurately, or that if you, got a degree, or took a 2-year Ayurveda program or something like that you would just really be able to articulate this. But it really all starts, and what I do every day as a practitioner is I take that moment to experience the food, and then I wrestle a little bit internally to express it, right? As I sit there and I think, how can I best express this? And one of the art of cuisine, right, and the joy of cooking is about delving into that experience of food, that experience of eating, and that is, such a delight. Food is such a delight. Why not take that extra moment to get into it a little bit, and also notice the effects it has on you, and come to a more fuller, richer understanding of the food.
Yes, I'm nodding away here, John. It's about getting back into our kitchens and knowing what's going into our food, because we have a big problem in the food industry with non-labeling and, this tricky marketing and processed food. So it's about getting back in touch with your food and the seasonal foods and with nature. So this is really going to help us. So now also, John, I want to talk about if a listener is very intrigued by this and wants to go on and to study digestion and nutrition with your Joyful Belly School. I know you have the Master Digestion and Nutrition 500-hour certification course starting in October, right?
Yes.
Tell us about it.
Yes, we do. Yeah, well, it's a year-long program where we will be doing this same kind of analysis with food as we did today on the talk. And in addition, learning really how, incredible insights into digestion, covering 30 major digestive tract pathologies. And so a person who is very interested in digestive health and wellness, who has a love of food, who wants to really open up to a whole new understanding of food, a richer understanding of our relationship with food, is just going to get so much out of that program. It starts in October. It ends in August, and really elevating your understanding of digestion and food to the point of mastery. It's a fun program that we run every year, as a group, and it's very exciting to me to actually get to do it every year because I get to talk about a subject I love.
I know, I can hear it in your voice. And what a great person to learn from. Someone that's that passionate and excited about food and nutrition. I love it. And so it's starting in October, so people need to get on there and register. And John has been very generous and given the Elements community a $750 scholarship to this course. So if you want to learn with John and, of course, take advantage of that $750 scholarship, I'll put the link in the show notes to the homepage of my website, and you use that link and they'll know that you came from the Elements community, and you can get on your way to opening this whole world of master digestion and nutrition. So what is the date in October, John, that it starts?
The second Tuesday, which is the 9th.
Okay, perfect.
October
so guys,
9th.
You have just a couple short weeks to get there, and you can hear how passionate John's about this. So a great course to take. So John, thank you again. Thank you for that wonderful, generous scholarship, and thank you for all the wisdom you shared today. And I look forward to our next episode, and I look forward to hearing the listeners' testimonials about their stewed apples and their broiled grapefruits.
Yeah, I can't wait to see it also, and thank you for having me, Colette. It's a real privilege to be here and sharing Ayurveda.
Well, thank you. It's just lovely. We're both so passionate about it and sharing it with everyone out there. So thank you for taking the time, and we will chat soon, John.
Take care.
All the best. Take care. So I hope you enjoyed that episode with John, and you got lots of great information there about how to cook Ayurvedically for you and your family, and also what foods are in season right now. And John gave us 2 great dishes to try for the Northern Hemisphere. It's the applesauce with ginger and ghee, and then for the Southern Hemisphere, it's the broiled grapefruit with cinnamon, cloves, and honey. And I'll put the links to those recipes in the show notes. And I'd love for you to try them out, experience them in your own body, see how it affects your body, your mind, and then give us your feedback and your photos of your dish if you want in the Elements of Ayurveda podcast Facebook group. I'll put the link to that Facebook group in the show notes as well. So we share as a community, and we get to see how these foods, the apples and the grapefruits, can affect people very differently. And this is why we want to do these recipes together. And this is why I want to do these regular episodes with John, because we need to really connect more to our food, connect with Mother Nature, what's in season, because Mother Nature's giving us what we need at that particular moment to keep our body and mind in balance. So very exciting to try these recipes. I will also put in the link to the Master Digestion and Nutrition course with Joyful Belly, and that link will include the $750 scholarship for the Elements community. Thank you so much for tuning in. I look forward to seeing your photos and your reviews on the Facebook podcast group, and I will connect with you soon. Ciao for now.